Hey guys, okay, so today is my first book YouTube video. I'm super excited about it. I'm going to be talking about how it was reading all of Sarah J. Maas's books this year, getting into the whole fandom and everything in between. As you can see, I have some up here. These are a few of the Throne of Glass series. And then I have Crescent City here, and then the rest are on my Kindle, which is right here. And kind of how this all started was I was in a book club, and they would do a first read, and then if you had more time, they would have like a second read. So I don't remember what the first read was. I think it was Clara and the Sun, which is kind of like this dystopian think piece novel. And it was good, but it's also like I felt I needed something that had some kind of like, I don't know, mental relaxation aspect to it. I just didn't want to think too hard when I was reading, you know. I like to view reading as a way to kind of like relax and think less. So anyways, the second book was the first Acotar book because there were a few girls in the group that really liked Acotar. And so they were like, okay, well yeah, everyone start reading Acotar. And I was like, what's Acotar? And one of the girls was like, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I was like, oh, okay, what's it about? And she was immediately like, fairies. And I was like, fairies? And she was like, yeah, but they're hot fairies, like, you have to give it a chance. And I was like, okay. And I was pretty new to the area, I had just moved. So I was like, well, I have time, you know? And so I got the first Acotar book on Audible. And for those of you who remember the first Acotar book, the beginning, I don't know, there's like so many chapters in the beginning where it's just Farah in the forest, or at least it felt like there were a lot of chapters of Farah in the forest hunting before she meets Tamlin. And so I'm listening to this Audible about fairies and this girl in the forest hunting, and I was like, what have I gotten myself into? I told everyone I was gonna read it. And I feel like I have really good follow through, so I was just like, okay, it's fine, just stick through it, stick through it. They said it gets better. I was like, and they had said that it was smutty. It was the first time I had ever heard the word smut, and I was like, what does smut mean? And one of the girls was like, oh, it's just like sexy, like it's like a sexier book. And so I was like, sexy fairies? And she was like, yeah, just keep reading, it'll be fine. So I was like, okay. So I like pushed my way through. Audible's like, I love reading Audible books if I'm doing other things like cleaning or cooking. It gives me something to do. So the benefit of that was I was like, it's fine. I'm just gonna like listen to this girl in this forest and get through the book, and it's gonna be fine, and I'll just tell them it was okay, yada yada, you know? And so I'm like, I got home from driving because that's when I started the Audible. I like literally remember where I was. I was like on my way home. I get inside, I start cleaning, and then obviously, spoiler for those of you who haven't read it, this is gonna be a spoiler, but when Tamlin shows up and he's all upset, I was like, oh, he's kind of hot. And I was like, oh, is this the fairy, you know, that they're talking about? So then all of a sudden I get super into the book, and I finished the first book, I think in a few days, on Audible. And immediately I was texting my friend, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like, I totally see why you guys like this book. And you know, at the end of the first book, everyone loves Tamlin, right? So I was like, Tamlin's so hot, he's so nice, like how thoughtful of him, you know? And so I was continuing with the series, and I think it took me maybe like 2-ish months to get through Acotar. I'm definitely Team Farah over Team Nesta. And I know that's super controversial because I know a lot of people like Nesta, but I do think that it's cool to have an opinion on, you know, like which sister you like. I also am not a huge Elaine fan because I feel like she was just like sitting around while everyone was starving. But anyway, I digress. I will talk about that more later. So yeah, so I get through Acotar and I'm like, this is so great, you know, like Sarah J. Maas. At that point, I had like been reading a little bit, like The Summer I Turned Pretty and some like books here and there, but I wasn't reading, you know, every week. So I was super excited to join the book club because I was like, okay, it gives me something to read. But after Acotar, I was like, oh my gosh, like I love reading, you know? I loved reading when I was younger, and then I feel like a lot of people, like we take breaks in high school. I think honestly because you're told to read all these other books during class, and so then it's kind of like reading becomes not fun and it becomes more like a responsibility almost. So yeah, I wasn't really into reading for like probably a decade. And so when I finished Acotar, I was like, this is amazing, you know, like I totally love reading. I just didn't love, you know, assigned reading, I guess. And so I finished that, and then everyone was like, okay, next you have to read Throne of Glass. And people were like, there are two groups of people. There are people that love Throne of Glass more, and there are people that love Acotar more. And my theory is it's kind of based on whichever series you start first. Because I think wherever you start, you kind of like fall in love with reading again, or with romantic fantasy, or whatever. And so I was like, okay, they were like, it's more war-ish. And I'm not a big like war movie person. I don't like war video games. I feel like they make me anxious. So I was like, okay. So then again, I'm like presented with this situation where I was like, oh, fine, I'll read it. You know, I'll read the first book and then, you know, just tell them that like I couldn't finish it or whatever. So I started it, and to be honest, like the Sarah J. Maas's books, there's so much world building that I feel like a lot of times the beginning 25% of the book is like boring. Because you're just like, yeah. So that's how I kind of felt over Throne of Glass. I'm like definitely more Acotar, but I love Dorian. He's the best, and I honestly think he didn't get that great of an ending, and I feel like he deserved a lot more. Maybe for for another time to discuss. But yeah, so read all Throne of Glass. I did kind of feel like, so there's a portion of Throne of Glass, as you guys know, where you have to do this like tandem read between, I think it's Tower of Dawn and something else. I don't know, it's Tower of Dawn and...
Something went wrong. Please try again.
I'm trying to figure out. Is it Empire of Storms? Maybe. So anyways, they're the tandem read, and I did not like doing the tandem read. Some people have said that you can do that, or you can just read them in order, because the one novel is just Kale's story, basically. So I was like, okay, I'll try to tandem read, but there was just so much information that I was just like, eh. And then finally getting to Kingdom of Ash, I feel like there were some really great points, but overall, I feel like I liked Acotar way more. So, finished Throne of Glass, which is a journey. There's so many books in Throne of Glass. My favorite was for sure, I think it's End of Queen of Shadows and Beginning of Heir of Fire, because that discusses Dorian's story, and I just love dark-haired, fluffy-haired boy. I love the blue eyes. I love the like, oh, I don't even know, kind of like angsty vibe in terms of like a book guy. And so when all that stuff happened to Dorian with the Vogue, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is such a good storyline. So I think those are my favorite of this series. And so when I finished that, I was just like, wow, you know, because you get through that part of reading and you're just like, this was a lot of books. And then you're just kind of like, well, what do I do next? And so then the next, obviously, in line is Crescent City. And I don't know if you guys listened to Sarah J. Maas. She had a podcast interview with Christina Lauren. And in it, she discussed the upcoming Crescent City, which comes out in January 2023. And so I watched it with my friend, but we hadn't read Crescent City yet, so we were like, yeah. interesting because it's like modern day, and then obviously Acotar and Throne of Glass are in the past, in another dimension. So I was like, how does that work? And then I had seen that Bryce really liked My Little Pony, and I had seen a few like fan art pics of her and Hunt with like My Little Pony shirts, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. I do think though that Crescent City was like the first series where when I picked it up and I started reading, like I loved it from the beginning. I think there were just like 2 or 3 pages where the world building is like super confusing, but I think like after that it's pretty much good to go. And so I really liked reading Crescent City. I got through those books super fast, like 2 or 3 days. These ones are actually the Barnes & Noble special editions, so they are super nice, and I'm going to be getting the 3rd one when it comes out in January. But yeah, so I got through the Crescent Cities, and then it's kind of like once you get through all of the Sarah J. Maas books, you're like, what do I do? And you obviously consider reading her Catwoman book, which I have not, because I found other books to read. But definitely I feel like after you read all the books, then you join all of the Facebook groups and you like look at all the memes and everything, and you look at the fan art and the Etsy pages and everything. So it's cool that there's such a community regarding the Sarah J. Maas franchise. So yeah, that was basically the story of how I got an Acotar and Throne of Glass and Crescent City. And as many of you know, I have a, I don't know what we would call it, like a book talk, in like a TikTok and then an Instagram. It started off just being meme based, and it has expanded into being a virtual book club, and there's gonna be merch and podcasts, etc. But it really is just like once you get into it, you're in, you know? It's cool because it's like a long initiation because there's so many books. So yeah, I'm super excited for the January release of the 3rd Crescent City book, and I'm hoping they're gonna have a midnight release party. I haven't heard anything yet, so comment if you have. I know for Iron Flame they did a release party, which is the 2nd book to 4th Wing, which is by a different author, but I feel like Sarah J. Maas has way more pull from that author. But I do know it's like after Christmas, so I'm not entirely sure if they're gonna be doing a midnight release party, but I do feel like I know enough information where I'm like, yes, let's do it, because Iron Flame Party, they have like trivia and stuff, and I feel like I'm prepped to to answer trivia about the Crescent City series, especially with the last ending with the crossover of Acotar. So I am very excited for that, and hopefully it'll happen. I'm definitely gonna have to call Barnes & Noble and be like, are you guys having a party? And hopefully the answer is yes. So anyways, thanks for watching my video discussing the Sarah J. Maas universe initiation that I had. And yeah, comment below how you started, which series you started with, which one you like best. I feel like if I were to rank them, I feel like I would do, I don't know. Sometimes I think Acotar is highest, but sometimes I'm like, well, maybe it's actually Crescent City. I kind of might tie them. I think I might tie Acotar and Crescent City as my first place, and then put Throne of Glass as my 2nd place. I do kind of feel like Dorian carried that series. And I liked Manon too. So yeah, that's my ranking for that. But comment below what your ranking is and your thoughts on all of the series. And I will see you guys in the next episode.